This reform is focused on improving compliance with the rules that are already in place. Madam Deputy Speaker, if I may, let me turn first to the amendment that's been tabled by the Right Honourable Member for Houghton, Price and Howden. I understand it won't be moved today, but I think it's important to be clear about the Government's position on it. To help businesses and individuals deal with the economic impacts of the coronavirus, on the 17th of March, the Government announced that the reform to the off-payroll working rules would be delayed by 1 year from the 6th of April 2020 until the 6th of April 2021. This amendment before us now would delay the introduction of the reform by a further 2 years to April 2023. But it is hard to see any genuine rationale for this further delay. The present measure was first introduced at Budget 2018. Since then, the Government has carried out 2 consultations on the detail of the reform. Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs have worked extensively to support businesses in preparing for the change. Draft legislation and guidance have been published. There was a further review earlier this year, which resulted in several additional improvements. By delaying until 2021, the Government has already ensured that businesses and contractors will not need to make final preparations for this reform until next year. There is therefore no need for further delay. Moreover, such a delay would have very significant drawbacks. It would not address the intrinsic unfairness of taxing 2 people differently for the same work. It would extend the disparity between the private and the public sectors, and it would come at a significant fiscal cost, which other taxpayers up and down the country would have to make up. If I turn now to the substance of the measure itself, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to address a number of further concerns that have been pressed by colleagues, including in particular the Honourable Member for North East Bedfordshire, the Honourable Member for Barrow in Furness, the Honourable Member for Workington and the Honourable Member for Watford. The first of these is that organisations will no longer engage with personal service companies as a result of this reform, reducing the number of contracts available in the labour market. Now, let me say on this that it is important to recognise that the Government is fully aware of the importance of the flexibility for individuals and businesses to agree working arrangements that suit their needs, and we know that that has been one of the pillars of the success of the UK labour market in recent years. In 2017, soon after the implementation of the public sector off-payroll reform, the Government commissioned independent research to assess its effect on the labour market. This found that in relation to that reform, the Government had not so far seen, and the independent researchers had not seen, any evidence of an overall change in the demand for the services and skills of contractors. Some organisations have clearly decided to change the balance of their employees and their contractors. This can be for many reasons. For example, where that better suits the evolving business model of that organisation. But many organisations will still choose to engage contractors using personal service companies where this is appropriate to their business. Nevertheless, the Government remains keen to ensure the long-term flexibility and success of the labour market. We will therefore use the additional time given by this 1-year delay to commission further independent and robust research into the long-term effects of the 2017 reform in the public sector. We want that research to be available before the reform comes into effect in other sectors in April 2021. And I can tell the House that the Government will give careful consideration to the results of this further research and thereafter will continue to monitor the effect of the reform on the labour markets of those sectors, including by commissioning independent research 6 months after this private and voluntary sector reform has taken effect. Secondly, colleagues have their concerns that organisations might take a blanket approach to status determinations, categorising all engagements as employment regardless of the facts. Government has been very clear that determinations must be based on an individual's contractual terms and actual working arrangements. Many businesses and public sector organisations have described processes that they have put in place to ensure that determinations are correct, based on the actual working practices of the individuals concerned. There is a vigorous contractor lobby which has also shown itself willing and able to highlight cases where they feel the rules are not being followed. And the reforms themselves include a client-led status disagreement process where contractors can lodge a complaint if they disagree on how they have been categorised. Thirdly, HMRC are continuing to help businesses to get their employment status determinations right by ensuring they have access to a wide programme of education and support. The independent research that we are announcing post-implementation next year will also evaluate from an external perspective whether decisions are being made properly. Finally, HMRC have committed to a light-touch approach to penalties in the first year of the reform and have stated in terms that the reform will not result in new compliance checks being opened into previous tax years unless there is reason to suppose or suspect fraud or criminal behaviour, and the same is true for penalties or for inaccuracies. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government very much values the important role that contractors play in the labour market and wants businesses to be able to design their workforces in a way that makes sense for them. But that should not mean that contractors pay less tax than employees where their engagement meets the test of an employment relationship. This legislation is designed to remedy that unfairness and to support the tax base needed to fund our public services, and I commend it to the House.
The question is as on the order paper. I now call Dan Carden, Shadow Minister, who is asked to speak for no more than 5 minutes.
Thank you.